Good evening. I'm Mike. I'm here. I'm going to talk about Linux and where I have been with Linux over the years and where I've gotten to. So, I used to use Unix for work. We did scientific computing. We still do. And back in those days, Unix is where it was at. You had a machine that had 8 CPUs and it had, I forget how much RAM. Wasn't very much if you think about it today, but in those days it was huge. I don't remember. But we were deciding what were we going to do to replace the old Unix machine at work. And we had a quote from HP for $500,000. And that's a lot of money. And we were thinking about what could be done. What could we replace it with? And there was this new thing called Linux. And Linux was not very common. You didn't hear about it much. There was starting to be stuff on the internet about it, but not a lot. So we were looking at what Linux could we use. We started with something called Slackware. And Slackware was fun. You basically got a shoebox of floppy disks because nothing was on CDs at the time. Everything was on floppy disks. So you start your install on your machine with floppy disk 1 and then 2 and then just keep going until you get to 26 or 30 or whatever it was. And that's how you installed Linux. It was interesting. You had to know what you were doing, and it was good. Slackware, we learned a lot. And then Red Hat came out, Red Hat Linux. Not Red Hat Enterprise Linux. This was way before then. Like this was 1998. Red Hat Linux was free. You had to pay for the media, I think. So we started doing Red Hat Linux to see if that would work. And then we started playing with things like putting a cluster together. And how would you use MPI in order to run a piece of software across more than one computer so that it would run and would be running as fast as it did on the Unix machine. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we finally decided that, yeah, we would do a cluster of computers, but that was a little while later. I took a bunch of 386s and 486s. There's a Pentium, I wasn't out yet, and I started installing on each one of them and then trying to make the whole thing run together. And I had 4 computers under my desk all working together, and you could run a program and it would run on them all. And then we could do some computing, and scientists could write their papers. And yeah, that was how we started with Linux. And we experimented with whatever came out. So eventually Debian came out, which was really cool for its time. And it's still cool. It's the basis of about half of what's out there now. You've got also Fedora came out, and we played with that. And we did all of our work computing on Red Hat, because then we could say this is what we ran on. But we experimented on everything we got our hands on. So we tried Ubuntu. when it came out. Some fun things we did. We had a system that had dual Athlon chips, AMD, and having two CPUs in the same system was new. Now you've got machines that have got multiple cores everywhere, but two single core CPUs on one machine. So I got that to work, and then my boss said, "Can you hook more screens to it?" So I scrounged up some screens and some video cards, and I found out we had to have all the same video card. I had name of the video card escapes me at the moment, but you had to have 4 of them, and they all had to be the same, so that you didn't have a mix-up with drivers. And then you have these 4 CPUs or 4 screens hooked up. And when you installed it, you had to put a window manager for each screen. But it didn't have to be the same window manager for each screen. So I had a really complicated XConf file, because I had a different window manager on each screen, and on each of those screens I had a different screensaver. And when I went to sleep and the screensaver came up, it confused everybody. It was fun. Then I got playing with something called Cluster Knoppix. Knoppix was a distribution that you could boot off of a CD and run. The self-booting CD. So you would have it boot, and with Cluster Knoppix, you set the first one up as the head node, and then all the other ones, when they came online, when looking for the head node, found it and linked up. And then you could use just any computer that you could just slip a CD into and reboot as part of your cluster. So at one point I had 40-some computers scattered all out throughout the building, hooked up as a single cluster. And I think at the time we were running 100 megabit Ethernet, so it wasn't all that fast, but it worked. And I could run a program and have it run overnight, and everybody would come back in the morning and their computers would be rebooted. Because I needed to run a program. So that was what we did. Then we went to CentOS for clusters. CentOS was Red Hat Enterprise compatible, but was free. And everybody wanted to use the free, so we made our clusters all use CentOS. So I think we had 3 clusters. I know I have one. And that was good. We started using Slurm as our job manager, and Slurm was good stuff. You could start a job and it would go to whatever computer was open and had the resources to run it. So you could have different resources and just go from there. And I had built the little cluster under my desk out from 4 to 16 computers at one point. And then I got moved to another office and I had to get rid of that. But we had 2 or 3 of these clusters going. IT had bought some computers and put in and make a cluster. And a lot of people use that because they had support. So that was good. I got moved into a building and I was working with some students. And I was showing them Linux, and I had a machine there, and for the fun of it, I installed Arch from scratch. And this was in the days when you had to do a command line. and tell it, okay, I want to do this. I want this as a window manager. I want this as my boot manager. You had to set everything up yourself. And there was only really one reason to do that, and that was just to prove you could do it. So it took me a day or two, first time. And I showed these students. And they came back to work the next week, and they're like, we're installing Arch on a system in our I guess they were in an apartment. And they were to the point where they got it to boot and could hook to the network, but they didn't have a visual graphical user interface working yet. And I encouraged them, and they kept going, and they got it going, which was pretty cool for some people who had only started using Linux like the month before. But, you know, computer science students or physics students, and they figured it out. They did good. So I've been looking around at what distribution I want to use for the long term. I want a distribution that I can ignore, but if I need to add stuff to it, I can add whatever I want. I can change it to be Wayland if I want, or I can just run it with the normal desktop. And you can add whatever program you want to these, so I can add in my cybersecurity tools and go from there. And I've tested a bunch, and although people tend to think this is a distribution for beginners, I went with Linux Mint, because you can change it any way you want, but it comes with the basics fairly easily set up. So I got a machine with an NVIDIA in it, and you can just pick the driver from the driver picker. It knows what to do to put it in, and you don't have to worry about it. It works. Mostly. So I've got one machine that's fairly powerful gaming machine, laptop, that I use for this as well as gaming, and I've not had any problems with it. You know, there was a problem with X, and having X was getting to the point where it would blank the screen and lock the computer. It was Xorg doing it. At least I thought it was Xorg doing it. But it's really a play between the NVIDIA driver and Cinnamon, because I switched over to Mate. I just call it Mate, and I haven't had that problem since. For a little while I was running Wayland, but after an update of I'm not sure if it was the kernel or the NVIDIA driver, and Wayland quit working with games. Just quit. So Mate works, so I'm using that. And that's my current desktop system, is this. It's an ROG Strix laptop. 32 gigabytes of RAM, Ryzen 9 CPU, 4070M GPU. Plays everything I want to play, except 32-bit. NVIDIA driver 595 has some upgrades to DLSS, but it doesn't have the 32-bit drivers in the Linux Mint distro. So I have a second system. It's a desktop. It's sitting under there somewhere. It's a AMD GPU and an AMD CPU, and it runs 32-bit games just fine, but it's not beefy enough to run the new 64-bit games. So there's my solution. Play some on one, some on the other, and I finally got a sound system working on that one. Instead of unplugging the microphone and plugging it back in over there every time, now I just use a little clip-on mic, and then I can do videos on there and whatever else. So that fixes my gaming situation. I also do some playing around with StyleGAN, and I use these two machines for that because they've got the GPUs. So AI works, and I use a Llama as a local AI, and I use it with different engines. GPT OSS 20 works okay. Olmo also works okay. So that's what these machines are for. OBS, I use Caden Live to do video editing, Steam and Proton to run the games, and Mod Organizer because you want to mod these games. You can mod pretty much anything you want now, and mostly I use them to get better FPS. Some games are locked, and you unlock them. You have to break the FPS to the physics engine, or you get hilarious results. This is where a lot of people have all these really weird things happen in Skyrim, because they've unlocked the FPS, but they've still left the physics engine working with the FPS, and you shoot something and it goes flying off. It's fun, but it's avoidable. So that's what I do on here. I actually have a Windows machine, which I'm sorry to say, I do use Windows. There are people who need help with Windows, and I still help people with their computers. And all the modding tools, like the GEC for Fallout 3 and Skyrim's modding tool, which I forget what it's called right now, they run on Windows. I've tried to run them on Linux, and you can make the changes and you can create things, but it's hit and miss whether or not it's going to save. And a lot of it is permissions based, and you have to have the saving the file in the right place, and you can't have your game in the wrong place or it won't save. And you just do it on Windows and that's fine. And then you just copy the mod over and install it, and you have a mod. So some of those mods will eventually end up out for people to play with. We'll see how that goes. So I have two other Linux Mint systems, one of which is behind me over there, and it's my social media platform. It's an older ROG laptop, so I used to use it for all my games. I've played everything up to Fallout 4 on that machine, and loading times sucked, but it does social media fine, and it's got my email, and it's got all my other stuff on it. So I offloaded that over there. I mean, it's a Linux Mint machine. If I want to run my email from there, but on this screen, that's what SSH is for. See, SSH minus Y into the computer, and you run the program, and it shows up here. But it's running there. Secure shell. Use it. We've got gigabit Ethernet between all the computers, so there's no slowdown or anything like that. Everything works just fine. And the other machine that you can't see behind me is an older gaming laptop from Acer, and it's got a hard drive stuck on it from external, and that's where my backups go. Mount it, copy a file over, unmount, and there's your backup. So I wish I'd backed up all my video files over there, because the hard drive I had them on, I managed to toast. So anyway, so there's all my Linux machines and my Linux experience. You know, I've run Linux, I've written software for Linux, I've hacked Linux, I've used Linux for cybersecurity. Linux works great. It does everything that we used to do on Unix, and then so much more. So Windows never, ever, ever was able to run any of our scientific software. There's just no way. There's too much overhead. There's too much bloat. There's no way to make a bunch of Windows computers act as one computer. It just... Windows is good for email and writing documents. And not even that. You get into a very big document, and Windows can't handle it. We made documents at work that were 600 pages long, and you put much mathematical formulas in it, and it would crash. And then you wouldn't be able to get your document back, except we had a trick. You open the Windows document, the Word document, in OpenOffice. Make a change. Save it in document format. And then you could open it on Windows again. We had to use Linux to save our documents because they were too complicated for Windows. So we just gave up on that, and now everything's latex. So, and we have a latex server. It's where everybody does their documents. So yeah. Windows is okay for some things, but it's not even good for gaming anymore. When Linux just runs games faster and better. So I keep it around because people send me stuff that's got macros in it, and the macros only run in Excel. So I take their macros from Excel, I convert them over to OpenOffice or LibreOffice, and then they work again. So, yeah. Windows still has a place, but not for long. Linux, it runs everything. So anyway, that's how I learned Linux and what I learned about it and how long it took me. Yeah, almost 30 years now. So keep going with Linux, and Linux Mint works. Anyway, that's it. I rambled on enough tonight, and I thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.